The cargo freighter shuddered as it docked with Threshold 7, the massive space station that hung like a steel flower in the darkness. Kim Day pressed his hand against the cold viewport, watching the docking clamps engage with metallic precision. His reflection stared back at him, a thin young man with tired eyes and oil-stained hands. 19 years old and already exhausted from the 3-month journey from Earth, the station was enormous. Day had seen pictures, read the specifications, but nothing prepared him for the reality. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds lived and worked here, on the very edge of known space. The hull stretched for miles in every direction, studded with lights and bustling with activity. Ships came and went like insects around a hive. When the airlock opened, the noise hit him first. The main corridor was chaos. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the space, some walking, some floating, some slithering. The air smelled strange, a mixture of 100 different atmospheres recycled and filtered. Day gripped his duffel bag tighter and followed the green guidance lights toward the administration section. Park Minji was waiting for him at the registration desk. She was one of the few humans on the station, her uniform crisp and her smile professional. "Kim Day, welcome to Threshold 7. I'm the assistant to the station administrator." Day nodded, suddenly aware of how rumpled and dirty he looked after months in transit. "Thank you. Where do I report?" Minji's smile faded slightly. "Maintenance Division, Lower Deck 12. But first I need to give you some advice." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The Vakthor run security here. They're warriors, proud, and they don't think much of humans. Keep your head down, do your work, and don't engage with them." "I'm just here to fix things," Day said. "I don't want trouble." "Good, because trouble finds people who don't want it." She handed him a data pad with his room assignment and work schedule. "Your shift starts tomorrow at 0600. Get some rest." The quarters were smaller than Day expected. A narrow bunk, a metal locker, and a tiny bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. He shared the space with 3 others, but they were all on different shifts. He unpacked his few belongings and lay down on the hard mattress, listening to the hum of the station's life support systems through the walls. Sleep didn't come. Tomorrow would be his first day, and despite Minji's warning, Day felt a flicker of excitement. This was what he'd trained for. This was his chance. The maintenance bay smelled like oil and ozone. Day reported to the shift supervisor, a grizzled human named Hyun who'd been on the station for 8 years. Hyun looked him up and down and grunted. "You know anything about coolant systems?" "Yes, sir. I specialized in thermal regulation at Academy." "Good, Power Core 3 has a leak. Radiation's low enough to work, but you'll need to suit up. Think you can handle it?" D nodded. Hyun handed him a repair kit and a radiation suit. "Core's on deck 8. You'll know it when you feel the heat. Fix it right the first time." The power core section was oppressively hot even through the suit. Dave found the leak quickly, a hairline fracture in one of the coolant pipes. Nothing major, but left unattended it would become a serious problem. He shut down the flow, sealed the breach, and ran a diagnostic to make sure the repair would hold. He was finishing the test when he heard voices behind him. Deep voices speaking in a language that sounded like rocks grinding together. Day turned and saw them for the first time. The Vakthor were massive. 8 feet tall, with bodies covered in what looked like natural armor plating. 4 arms, each ending in 3-fingered hands that could probably crush steel. Their faces were angular, almost insect-like, with mandibles that clicked when they spoke. 3 of them stood in the doorway watching him work. Day nodded politely and turned back to his diagnostic. He could feel their eyes on him. "Look at the soft skin," one of them said in heavily accented standard. "So small. So weak." Another laughed, a harsh buzzing sound. "They let these things work on station systems? Better to use machines." Day kept working, his hands steady despite the anger building in his chest. The diagnostic came back clean. He packed his tools and started to leave. The largest Vakthor stepped in front of him. "You finish already?" "Impossible. Soft skins are slow and stupid." "The repair is complete," Day said quietly. "You can check the system logs. I am Rekthar." The alien leaned down, bringing his face close to Day's helmet. "You know what we do to weak things in the Vakthor clans? We leave them behind. Natural selection." Day said nothing. He tried to step around, but Rekthar blocked him again. "Maybe I test your work," Rekthar said. He reached out with one of his lower arms and gripped the pipe Day had just repaired. Before Day could react, the Vakthor twisted hard. Metal screamed and the seal cracked. Coolant began to drip from the fracture. "Oh no," Rekthar said in mock concern. "Your repair fails. Soft skin cannot do proper work." "I just fixed that," Day said, his voice still quiet but harder now. "You broke it deliberately. Prove it." Rekthar straightened to his full height. "Or maybe you want to fight me? Prove you are strong enough to work here?" The other two Vakthor clicked their mandibles in amusement. Day looked at the damaged pipe, then at the warriors blocking his path. Fighting was pointless. They were trained killers and he was an engineer with no combat experience. "I'm not a fighter," Day said. "I'm here to fix things, not break them." Rekthar made a sound of disgust. "Coward, just like all humans." He stepped aside. "Go, Softskin. Run away." Day walked past them, his face burning with shame and anger. Behind him, he heard them laughing and speaking in their own language. He didn't need to understand the words to know what they were saying. He reported the sabotage to Hyun, but the old man just shook his head. "You've got no proof, kid. And even if you did, who's going to believe you over a Vakthor? Just fix it again and stay out of their way." Over the next weeks, it got worse. His tools went missing. His access codes were revoked without explanation, forcing him to wait hours for authorization while critical systems stayed broken. He was excluded from safety briefings and shift meetings. The other maintenance workers started avoiding him, not wanting to be associated with someone the Vakthor had marked. Even other species on the station began treating him differently. A Vrelian merchant refused to sell him food. A Quilix diplomat stepped around him like he was contaminated. The Vakthor's contempt was spreading like a disease. Minji found him one night in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. She sat down beside him without speaking. "You were right," Day said finally. "I should have kept my head down. You didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. I'm finished here." "No," Minji said firmly. "You're not. Do you know what they call humans in the Galactic Council? They call us the stubborn ones, because we don't give up, ever." Day looked at her. "What am I supposed to do? I can't fight them." "Then don't fight. Do what you're good at. Fix things. Keep this station running. Show them what you're really worth." She left him there, alone with the stars. Day sat for a long time thinking about her words. Then he went back to his quarters, set his alarm, and prepared for the next shift. If they wanted to break him, they would have to try harder. He was human, after all, and humans didn't break easily. 3 months passed like a slow torture. Day woke before dawn every day, worked until his hands bled, and fell asleep too exhausted to dream. He took every job no one else wanted. Crawling through radiation-soaked corridors to fix damaged relays, spending hours in zero gravity repairing engine manifolds, working in sections of the station so hot that his suit's cooling system ran constantly at maximum power. He said nothing. He endured everything, and he kept the station running. The other engineers noticed. Hyun stopped giving him sympathetic looks and started giving him respect. "You're good, kid," he said one morning, watching Day reassemble a plasma regulator in half the expected time. "Better than anyone I've seen in years. You keep this up, you'll make chief engineer before you're 30. Day just nodded and moved on to the next repair. Praise didn't change anything. The Vakthor still mocked him in the corridors. Other species still avoided him. But at least the machines never judged him. They broke, he fixed them, and they worked. Simple, clean, honest. Then everything changed. The emergency klaxons woke Day from a deep sleep. Red lights flashed in his quarters and a voice boomed through the station intercom. "All personnel to stations. Emergency Protocol 7. This is not a drill." Day threw on his uniform and ran to the maintenance bay. Hyun was already there, pulling up station logs on the main display. "We've got a situation. Mining colony on Keth 9 sent a distress signal. Native predators overran their defenses. Hundreds of people trapped. Who's responding?" Day asked the Vakthor. "Commander Torgon is assembling a rescue team." Hyun's face was grim. "They're taking their assault transport. Best warriors on the station." Day felt a knot form in his stomach. "When do they leave?" "As soon as the ship is ready." Hyun looked at him. "Why?" "Just curious," but Day wasn't curious. He was worried. The Vakthor transport was a military vessel, heavily armed and shielded. It was also temperamental. He'd been meaning to run a full diagnostic on its systems for weeks, but the Vakthor engineers kept refusing his requests to access it. Now they were going to take it into combat without checking if it would even make the jump. He went back to his quarters and tried to sleep, but the worry gnawed at him. Finally, he gave up and went to the docking bay just to see if they'd launched yet. They hadn't. The transport sat in its cradle, lights dark, completely powered down. A crowd had gathered near the loading ramp. Vakthor warriors in full combat armor stood in angry groups, their mandibles clicking in agitation. Station officers argued with Commander Torgon. Day moved closer, trying to hear what was wrong. "The systems are dead," Torgon was saying, his voice a low growl. "Navigation, life support, weapons, everything crashed. My engineers cannot fix it." "How long to get another ship ready?" an officer asked. 18 hours minimum. By then, everyone on that colony will be dead." Day felt everyone's eyes turn toward him, not because they were looking at him specifically, but because word had spread. There was a human engineer on the station who could fix anything. The one the Vakthor had spent months humiliating. Minji appeared beside him, breathing hard like she'd been running. "Day, they need you." "They made it very clear they don't need me for anything," Day said quietly. "People are dying. Children, families." She grabbed his arm. "I know what they did to you. I know how much they hurt you. But this isn't about them. It's about the people on that colony who didn't do anything wrong." Dee looked at the transport, then at the Vakthor warriors. Torgon was watching him now, recognition dawning on his face. The commander's expression showed no apology, no regret. "Just cold calculation. Please," Minji whispered. "Be better than them." Day closed his eyes. He thought about walking away, about letting them figure it out themselves. Then he thought about the families on Keth 9, hiding in the dark while monsters hunted them. He thought about what it meant to be human. Not the weakness the Vakthor saw, but the stubborn refusal to let innocents suffer. He opened his eyes. "I'll need full access to all ship systems. No interference." Torgon's mandibles clicked. "You will fix our ship?" "I'll try. No guarantees, and try quickly." Every minute cost lives. Day climbed the ramp into the transport. The interior was designed for Vakthor, everything oversized and reinforced. He found the engineering station and started running diagnostics. The damage was worse than he expected. A cascading software corruption that had spread through every linked system. Someone had tried to install a patch without proper safety protocols, and it had infected the entire network like a virus. He worked for 22 hours straight. The Vakthor warriors watched him from the cargo bay, saying nothing but clearly doubting he could succeed. Day ignored them. He dove into the code, finding the corruption and burning it out line by line. His eyes burned. His fingers cramped. He drank stimulant after stimulant until his heart raced and his hands shook. But slowly, system by system, the ship came back to life. Navigation first, then life support, then weapons and shields, finally the engines. When the main power indicator turned green, Day heard clicking sounds behind him. The Vakthor warriors were stirring, checking their equipment. Commander Torgon approached the engineering station. "You did it," Torgon said. It wasn't quite gratitude, but it wasn't contempt either. "The systems are online," Day said, his voice hoarse. "But I can't guarantee they'll stay stable." The corruption went deep. "You might have problems during the mission. Then you will come with us." It wasn't a question. Day turned to look at him. "What? You fixed the ship. Now you will maintain it during the mission. We cannot afford more failures." Torgon's eyes were hard. "Consider it your duty. I'm not trained for combat operations. You are an engineer. You will stay with the ship while we hunt." Torgon turned away. "We leave in 1 hour. Be ready." Day wanted to argue, but exhaustion crushed the words before they could form. He stumbled down the ramp and found Minji waiting. "They're taking me with them," he said. "I heard." She looked worried. "Day, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He managed a tired smile. "Those systems might fail. If they do, people die. I can't let that happen." She hugged him, quick and fierce. "Come back safe. I'll try." Day went to his quarters and grabbed emergency supplies, basic tools, a medical kit, nutrient bars. He changed into a survival suit rated for harsh environments. When he returned to the docking bay, the warriors were already boarding. They looked at him with expressions he couldn't read. Disdain, curiosity? He was too tired to care. He found a spot in the cargo hold and strapped himself in. The engines roared to life and the transport lifted from its cradle. Through the viewport, Day watched Threshold 7 shrink behind them, becoming just another star in the darkness. Across from him sat an older Vakthor, his armor covered in scars and his mandibles marked with ritual carvings. Unlike the others, This one was watching Day with something that might have been interest. When their eyes met, the Vakthor tilted his head slightly in acknowledgement. Day nodded back, too exhausted to wonder what it meant. He closed his eyes as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving known space behind. The colony on Keith 9 was 3 days away. 3 days to rest, to prepare, and to wonder if he would survive what was coming. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched into lines of light and the universe seemed very large and very dark. Day slept, and dreamed of machines that never judged, never hated, and never broke their promises. Unlike people, unlike aliens, unlike everything else in the cold galaxy that had decided he wasn't worth their time, but he would prove them wrong. Not with words or violence, but with the only thing he knew how to do. He would survive. He would fix what was broken. And he would make sure everyone got home. That was what humans did. That was what made them dangerous. The cave was dark and cool, a welcome relief from the brutal heat outside. Day sat with his back against the stone wall, while Kael'ren finished bandaging a deep cut on his leg. The old Vakthor's movements were gentle despite his size, his scarred hands surprisingly deft. 40 years ago, Kael'ren began, his voice echoing softly in the cave. I was young, arrogant. I believed strength was everything, just as the others believe now. He sealed the bandage and sat back. My unit was ambushed on a world much like this one. Jungle, heat, predators that hunted us instead of the other way around. Day listened, too exhausted to speak but grateful for the distraction from the pain. We fought well. We killed many, but there were too many of them and too few of us. One by one, my brothers fell. Finally, only I remained. Kael'ren's mandibles clicked softly. I could have died with them. That would have been the honorable thing, the glorious thing. Instead, I ran. He paused, and in that silence, Day heard shame that had never fully healed. I used traps. I collapsed tunnels behind me. I led predators into environmental hazards. I survived not through strength, but through cunning. When rescue finally came, I was the only survivor. Kael'ren looked at Day directly. Do you know what they called me? Coward? The warrior who ran while his brothers died gloriously. But you survived, Day said quietly. That takes strength too. That is what I told myself. But it took many years before I believed it. I spent those years proving myself the only way my people understand. Through combat. I became the greatest hunter of my generation. I earned these scars. He gestured to his armor. I earned respect. Then why are you here? Why aren't you leading? Because I learned something in those years. True strength is not about killing the most enemies or dying gloriously. True strength is doing what must be done to protect others, even if it brings shame, even if no one will honor you for it. Kael'ren's eyes held Day's. You led death away from those who could not fight. You sacrificed yourself so others might live. That is what warriors do. The rest is just decoration. Day felt something break inside him. Not collapse, but break open. For 3 months he had endured mockery and isolation. He had kept his head down and worked until his hands bled. He had told himself it didn't matter what they thought. But it had mattered. It had hurt. And now this old warrior, this legend among his people, was telling Day he had worth. Thank you, Day whispered. Do not thank me yet. We still must survive this planet. Kael'ren stood and checked his weapons. The mission is not going as planned. Torgon's force has evacuated most of the survivors, but his squad is pinned down. There is an Alpha Shrike, much larger than the others, intelligent enough to use tactics. It has trapped them in the colony's central dome. Can we help? That is why I came to find you. The Alpha will not fall to direct assault. We need to be clever. Kael'ren offered Day a hand and pulled him to his feet. The colony has geothermal mining equipment. Could we use it? Day's mind immediately began working through the possibilities. Geothermal charges, yes, if we place them correctly, we could trigger a controlled eruption. The heat and pressure would force the Shrikes into a killing zone, where the Vakthor could eliminate them. Exactly. But someone would need to place the charges manually. The control systems are probably destroyed. Kael'ren nodded slowly. Then we place them together. No. Day's voice was firm. You need to get to Torgon, tell him the plan. Coordinate the evacuation so no one is caught in the eruption. I'll place the charges. That is suicide. The mines are unstable, filled with volcanic gas and collapsing tunnels. I'm smaller than you. I can move faster, fit through tighter spaces. Day managed a weak smile. Besides, I'm good at fixing things. This is just reverse engineering. Kael'ren stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his armor and pulled out a small blade, ornately carved with ritual markings. He cut his palm, letting dark blood pool in his hand. You're not Vakthor Kimday, but you have the spirit of a warrior. When this is over, I will claim you as blood brother before all my people. Day didn't fully understand what that meant, but he understood it was important. Sacred. He nodded. They left the cave together. Kael'ren guided them toward the colony through hidden paths, avoiding Shrike patrols. They could hear the battle ahead, plasma fire roaring, the sounds of something massive moving through the ruins. At the edge of the colony, they separated. Kael'ren gripped Day's shoulder once, then disappeared into the smoke and chaos. Day turned toward the mine entrance and began his descent into the darkness. The mines were hell. The temperature climbed with every meter down. Toxic gases burned Day's throat despite his suit's filters. The tunnel walls trembled constantly, raining dust and debris. Emergency lights flickered in the darkness, showing glimpses of the massive machinery that had once pulled energy from the planet's core. Day found the first charge placement point and set to work. The colony engineers had been professionals. Their explosives were powerful and stable. Day rigged the detonator, then moved deeper into the mine. Second placement, third. Each one had to be precise. Too much force and the eruption would be uncontrolled, killing everyone. Too little and it would be ineffective. Sweat poured down his face. His hands shook from exhaustion and heat exposure. The suit's medical systems were pumping him full of stimulants and antitoxins, but he could feel his body failing. Just a little longer. Just a few more charges. The tunnel collapsed behind him. Day dove forward as rock and metal crashed down, sealing the passage. He lay in the darkness for a moment, gasping, then pulled himself up. There was another way out through the main shaft. He just had to finish the job first. Fourth charge. Fifth. The sixth and final charge placement was directly beneath the colony's central dome, the most dangerous spot but the most critical. This one would trigger the eruption that drove the Shrikes into the open. Day set the charge with trembling hands. The detonator showed all 6 lights green. He activated the remote trigger and began climbing toward the surface. The main shaft was a vertical climb of nearly 200 meters. Day's arms burned as he hauled himself up the emergency ladder. Each rung was agony. His vision blurred. The stimulants were wearing off and exhaustion was crushing him. He emerged from the mine into chaos. The central dome was ahead, its structure torn open. Through the gaps, Day could see the Alpha Shrike. It was enormous, easily twice the size of the others, with scars covering its hide and intelligence burning in its eyes. It circled the dome, probing for weaknesses while the Vakthor inside fired at it desperately. Kael'ren was there, coordinating with Torgon. They saw Day emerge and Kael'ren made a signal, charges ready. Day held up the remote detonator and nodded. But he realized the problem immediately. The Alpha wasn't in the right position. If Day triggered the charges now, the eruption would miss it. The Alpha would survive while the Vakthor were still trapped and vulnerable. He needed to move it. Draw it to the right spot. Before Kael'ren could stop him, Day stood and walked into the open. He activated his suit's external speakers and made as much noise as possible. The Alpha's head snapped toward him. Those intelligent eyes focused on this small, weak creature that dared challenge it. Day ran, not away from the eruption point but toward it, leading the monster exactly where it needed to be. The Alpha followed, its massive feet shaking the ground. Day could feel its hot breath on his back. He reached the marker point, a twisted piece of metal that showed where the main vent would erupt. He dove to the side and pressed the detonator. The ground exploded upward. Superheated gas and magma burst from below in a column of orange fury. The Alpha tried to dodge, but the eruption was too fast, too massive. It screamed as the heat engulfed it, its scales catching fire, its body thrashing. Day felt the heat wave coming and knew he was too close. Then Kael'ren was there, his armored body shielding Day from the worst of the blast. They tumbled together across the torn ground, the old warrior taking damage that would have killed Day instantly. When the eruption subsided, the Alpha was dead, a blackened corpse in a crater of cooling stone. The remaining Shrikes fled, their pack leader destroyed. The Vakthor emerged from the dome, weapons ready, but there was nothing left to fight. Kael'ren lay beside Day, his armor cracked and smoking. Medics rushed toward them both. Day reached out and gripped one of Kael'ren's hands. "Brother," Day whispered. Kael'ren's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. "Brother," he agreed, his voice weak but certain. The transport's medical bay was crowded. Day lay on a human-sized gurney while doctors worked on his burns and exhaustion. Beside him, Kael'ren occupied a reinforced bed designed for Vakthor, his armor removed to reveal the deep scorches across his chest and back. The old warrior had taken the worst of the eruption's heat to shield Day, and the damage was severe. But they were alive. More importantly, everyone was alive. All 237 colonists had been evacuated. The Vakthor warriors had suffered injuries but no deaths. The mission was a complete success. Commander Torgun stood at the entrance to the medical bay watching the doctors work. His expression was unreadable, but he hadn't left since they'd brought Day and Kael'ren aboard. When the doctors finally stepped back, Torgun approached. He looked at Day for a long moment, then lowered himself to one knee. The gesture was shocking. Vakthor commanders never knelt to anyone except their clan elders. "I have wronged you," Torgun said, his voice formal and clear. "We all have. We judged you by our standards and found you weak. We were blind." Day tried to speak, but Torgun continued. "You saved this ship when we could not. You saved the mission when it would have failed. You saved my warriors when we were trapped." The commander's mandibles clicked slowly. "You did what we are trained for, but you did it better. You adapted. You survived. You sacrificed yourself for others without hesitation or thought of glory." "I was just doing my job," Day said quietly. "No. You were being human." Torgun stood. "I understand now what that means. I will carry this lesson for the rest of my life." From his bed, Kael'ren spoke, his voice weak but steady. "Commander, I invoke the right of Korvath. I claim this human as blood brother." The medical bay went silent. Even the doctors stopped working. The right of Korvath was ancient and sacred. In all of Vakthor history, it had never been offered to an alien. Torgun's eyes widened. "Are you certain? This cannot be undone." "I am certain." Kael'ren reached out with one hand. Day stood beside me against death. He led monsters away from the helpless. He walked into fire so others might live. His spirit is Vakthor even if his body is not. I name him brother before all witnesses. Day looked at the scarred hand extended toward him. He didn't fully understand the significance, but he understood it mattered. He gripped Kael'ren's hand. "Brother," Day said. "Brother," Kael'ren agreed. The other Vakthor in the medical bay clicked their mandibles in acknowledgement. One by one, they approached and touched their hands to their chests in salute. Not to a soft skin, not to a weak engineer, but to a warrior who had earned their respect. The journey back to Threshold 7 took 3 days. Day spent most of it sleeping, his body finally crashing after the extended stress. When he woke, he found Kael'ren sitting beside his bed reading something on a datapad. "You should be resting," Day said. "So should you, yet here we are, stubborn and awake." Kael'ren set down the pad. "I have requested permanent transfer to Threshold 7. My hunting days are ending, and I would rather spend my remaining time with my brother than with warriors who still believe glory is everything. You're going to be bored. I mostly fix air recyclers and coolant systems. Then you will teach me to fix air recyclers and coolant systems. Every warrior should learn new skills," Day smiled. It felt strange, like a muscle he hadn't used in months. "I'd like that." When they arrived at Threshold 7, half the station seemed to be waiting at the docking bay. Word had spread. The human engineer who'd been mocked and dismissed had saved an entire rescue mission. The Vakthor who had treated him with contempt now stood at attention as he walked down the ramp. Minji pushed through the crowd and hugged him hard enough to hurt his healing burns. "You absolute idiot. I told you to come back safe. I did come back." "Mostly safe. Mostly doesn't count." She pulled back, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you." The days that followed were strange. Day returned to his duties in the maintenance division, but everything had changed. Vakthor warriors nodded to him in corridors. Other species who had avoided him now greeted him respectfully. Engineers who had ignored his requests for help now sought his approval on their work. The biggest change was Rekthar. The young Vakthor who had sabotaged Day's first repair appeared in the maintenance bay one morning, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Day," Rekthar said formally, "I have wronged you. I shamed you when you deserved honor. I am not worthy to ask forgiveness, but I ask anyway. Day looked at him for a long moment. He could see genuine shame in Rekthar's posture, genuine regret in his eyes. Holding on to anger would be easy, but it would also be pointless. What mattered was moving forward. "You're forgiven," Day said, "but I need someone to help me repair the power core on Deck 8. It's the one you broke 3 months ago. Think you can do that without sabotaging it?" Rekthar's eyes widened. "You want me to work with you?" "I want someone who's learning not to judge too quickly. Someone who can maybe teach other Vakthor that strength comes in many forms. Think you can handle that?" Yes, I can." So Rekthar joined the maintenance division. A Vakthor warrior working under a human engineer, it was unprecedented. But many things were becoming unprecedented on Threshold 7 weeks past. Day was promoted to Assistant Chief Engineer, a position that put him in charge of critical systems. He worked alongside Kael'ren, teaching the old warrior the basics of engineering while learning Vakthor combat philosophy in return. They were an odd pair, the small human and the massive alien teacher and student to each other. One evening, Day found himself in the observation lounge, watching ships come and go through the viewport. The station hummed around him, alive and functional. He had helped keep it that way. Not through violence or grand gestures, but through steady work and refusal to give up. Kael'ren joined him at the window, moving quietly despite his size. They stood in companionable silence, watching the universe spin outside. "You know," Kael'ren said finally, "when I first saw you on the transport, I thought you would break. The others had hurt you badly, and I believed the mission would finish what they started. I almost did break," Day admitted. "Every day for 3 months I wanted to quit, to go back to Earth and forget about space, but you did not. No, because someone once told me that humans are stubborn." "We don't give up," Day smiled. "Turns out that's a kind of strength too." "The best kind." Kael'ren was quiet for a moment. "Strength is not in the body, Kim Day. It is in the spirit that refuses to break even when breaking would be easier. You taught me that lesson again, and I am grateful. You saved my life on Keth 9. Multiple times. And you saved mine by reminding me why I became a warrior in the first place. Not for glory or honor, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Kael'ren placed a hand on Day's shoulder. "You are my brother, not because of ritual or custom, but because you have earned a place in my heart that few ever reach." Day felt his throat tighten. For so long he had been alone. Now he had found something he never expected in the vastness of space. Family. "Thank you," Day said quietly, "for seeing me when no one else would. Thank you for showing me what I had forgotten, that the strongest warrior is the one who fights for others, not for himself." They stood together in the observation lounge watching the stars. Two beings from different worlds, bound by something stronger than species or culture. Bound by respect, by sacrifice, by the simple choice to stand together against the darkness. In the distance, a ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, its engines leaving trails of light against the black. More ships would come, more missions would arise, more challenges would test them, but whatever came, they would face it together. Because that was what brothers did. That was what warriors did. And Kim Day had learned he was both, whether the galaxy believed it or not. The station hummed around them, alive with thousands of beings going about their lives. Lives made possible by engineers who worked in shadows, by warriors who fought without seeking glory, by people who simply refused to let others suffer when they had the power to help. Day looked at his reflection in the viewport. He saw the same tired eyes, the same oil-stained hands, but he also saw something new. Confidence, purpose, belonging. He had come to Threshold 7 as an outsider. He was leaving as something else entirely. He was home. Keth 9 appeared in the viewport like a green jewel wrapped in clouds. The planet was beautiful. Dense jungles, massive oceans, and mountain ranges that pierced the atmosphere. It was also a death trap. High gravity, extreme temperatures, and an atmosphere so thick with moisture that breathing felt like drowning. The transport shuddered as it entered the atmosphere. Dee gripped his harness, watching the hull temperature climb on the engineering displays. The systems held, but barely. He made adjustments on the fly, routing power away from non-essential functions to keep the shields stable. Commander Torgon stood at the front of the cargo bay, addressing his warriors. "The colony is 5 kilometers from our landing site. Survivors have barricaded themselves in the central complex. Our mission is to eliminate the Shrikes and evacuate all personnel. These creatures are apex predators, fast, intelligent, and deadly. Do not underestimate them. The warriors clicked their mandibles in acknowledgement. Day noticed the scarred Vakthor from before was still watching him. When Torgan finished his briefing, this older warrior approached. "I am Kaelrin," he said, his standard more precise than the others. "You are the engineer who fixed our ship, Kim Day. You work well under pressure. That is good. You will need that skill here." Kaelrin handed him a plasma pistol. "Do you know how to use this?" Day took the weapon awkwardly. "I've had basic training. I'm not a fighter. Few are until they must be." Kaelrin showed him the safety and power settings. "Stay with the ship. If something approaches, shoot first and question later. The Shrikes show no mercy." The landing was rough. The transport settled onto a cleared area near the colony's edge, surrounded by jungle so thick that visibility dropped to a few meters. The moment the ramp lowered, heat and humidity flooded the cargo bay. Day's suit immediately began working overtime to keep him cool. The Vakthor moved out in formation, their weapons ready. Torgan assigned 2 warriors to perimeter security, then led the main force toward the colony. Kaelrin looked back at Day once before disappearing into the jungle. Silence fell. Day stood at the ramp, staring into the green wall of vegetation. Something moved in there. He could hear branches breaking and strange calls echoing through the trees. He backed into the ship and activated the external sensors. The colony appeared on his display, or what was left of it. Buildings were torn open. Bodies lay in the streets. The central complex showed signs of life. Heat signatures huddled together, barricades blocking entrances. But surrounding them were dozens of larger signatures. The Shrikes. Day settled into the engineering station and ran continuous diagnostics. The systems were holding, but stress fractures were forming in the power distribution network. He made repairs as they appeared, working steadily to keep the ship operational. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, turning the jungle into a steam bath. Day drank water and monitored the situation. On the tactical display, he watched the Vakthor approach the colony. The plan was simple: draw the Shrikes away from the complex while another team evacuated the survivors. Then the sensors screamed a warning. Multiple contacts approaching the landing site. Fast. Too fast. Day pulled up the external cameras and felt his blood freeze. Shrikes. At least 6 of them, moving through the jungle in coordinated patterns. They were massive, 12 feet tall, covered in scaled hide that shifted color to match their surroundings. Razor claws, powerful legs, and heads full of teeth. They moved like liquid death, silent and purposeful. They had circled back. While the Vakthor were drawing the main pack away from the survivors, a hunting party had tracked back to the ship. They knew. They understood tactics. They had identified the escape route and were moving to cut it off. Day tried to radio Torgan but got only static. The Shrikes were jamming communications somehow. He was alone. His hands shook as he sealed the ship and armed the defensive systems. The Shrikes emerged from the jungle and began circling the transport. One of them approached the hull and struck it with a claw. The metal shrieked and a deep gouge appeared on the external camera. They could tear through the hull given enough time. Day had minutes at best. He ran through options in his mind. He couldn't fight them. 6 against 1 was suicide, even with a weapon. He couldn't fly the ship away. The Vakthor and survivors would be stranded. He couldn't call for help. Communications were down. He had to do something they didn't expect. Day pulled up the ship's power systems and found what he needed. The external hull had electromagnetic field generators designed to protect against space debris. If he overloaded them, he could create a pulse that would disrupt organic nervous systems. It would also damage the ship's systems and leave them vulnerable. But he was out of options. He routed all available power to the generators and activated them. The pulse burst outward in a sphere of invisible energy. Through the cameras, Day watched the Shrikes convulse and scatter, their bodies twitching as their neural pathways scrambled. But the ship's systems crashed. Lights went dark. Displays died. Emergency power kicked in, but the damage was severe. The pulse had fried half the circuits Day had spent 22 hours repairing. Worse, the hull was breached. The Shrikes had torn a hole before the pulse hit. They were recovering now, shaking off the effects faster than Day had hoped. In minutes they would be back and the ship's defenses were gone. Day grabbed his emergency toolkit and the plasma pistol. He couldn't let them destroy the ship. The survivors needed it. The Vakthor needed it. He had to draw them away, give the ship time to be repaired when help arrived. He ran down the ramp into the jungle, firing the pistol into the air. The Shrikes turned toward him, their attention shifting from the ship to this new target. Day ran, crashing through undergrowth, leaping over roots, sliding down muddy slopes. Behind him, he heard them coming. The sound of their pursuit was terrifying. Heavy feet pounding, claws tearing through vegetation, hunting calls echoing. The gravity was crushing. Each step felt like lifting weights. Day's lungs burned in the thick atmosphere. Sweat poured down his face despite the suit's cooling, but he kept running because stopping meant dying. He ran past a cluster of volcanic vents releasing superheated gas. An idea sparked. Day grabbed a fusion cutter from his toolkit and sealed one of the vents. Pressure built rapidly. When the lead Shrike charged past, Day shot the seal. The vent exploded, sending gas and rock fragments into the creature's face. It screamed and fell back, clawing at its eyes. Day ran again. He found an area where electrical storms had left charged particles in the air. Using his toolkit, he created a crude circuit between two trees. When a Shrike ran between them, Day completed the circuit. Electricity arced through the creature's body, dropping it in smoking convulsions. But there were still 4 more. Day was exhausted, injured from multiple falls and running out of tricks. He stumbled into a ravine and collapsed against a rock face. His pistol was empty. His toolkit was nearly depleted. The Shrikes were closing in, moving more carefully now. Having learned he was dangerous despite his size, Day looked up at the green canopy above and thought about Earth. About his mother, who had cried when he left for the academy. About Minji, who had believed in him when no one else did. About proving something to people who would never respect him anyway. Maybe this was enough. Maybe keeping the ship safe so others could escape was enough. Maybe one human's life traded for hundreds of others was a fair exchange. The Shrikes entered the ravine, spreading out to surround him. Day closed his eyes and waited for the end. Then something massive dropped from above. Kaelrin landed between Day and the Shrikes, his 4 arms holding weapons that blazed with plasma fire. He moved like a hurricane, each shot precise, each movement calculated. 2 Shrikes died in seconds. The others backed away, reassessing this new threat. Kaelrin didn't give them time. He pressed the attack, driving them back with sustained fire. When his weapons overheated, he drew blades from his armor and closed to melee range. Day watched in awe as the old warrior fought with skill earned over decades. The Shrikes were fast, but Kaelrin was faster. They were strong, but he was stronger where it mattered. In experience, in technique, in the cold knowledge of how to kill efficiently. The last Shrike fled into the jungle. Kaelrin let it go and turned to Day. "Can you walk?" Day nodded, unable to speak. Kaelrin hoisted him up with one arm and pulled him deeper into the ravine. They found a cave entrance partially hidden by vines. Inside, the temperature dropped and the sounds of the jungle faded. Kaelrin set Day down gently and began treating his injuries with supplies from his own pack. The Vakthor worked in silence for several minutes before speaking. "I followed your trail. You led them away from the ship deliberately." "Had to," Day managed. "They would have destroyed it. Everyone would be trapped. You could have stayed sealed inside. Eventually help would have come, and by then it would be too late. Better to run. Give the ship a chance." Kaelrin's mandibles clicked softly. "Tell me something, Kim Day. Why did you come on this mission?" "You owe us nothing. We have treated you with contempt since you arrived." Day looked at him. "Doesn't matter what you did. People were dying. I could help. So I did." Kaelrin was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak.